Hello, hello, everybody. I believe we're live. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. As you might have guessed by registering for this thing, I am Lara Schmidt. I am the author of Redefining HR. I'm a big HR nerd, and I'd like to spend my time talking to people like Katelin, who are kind of pushing the boundaries of the field of HR. So Katelin is actually going to be our host. We're gonna flip the script today. So Katelin, I can sing superlatives all day on your intro, but I don't want to embarrass you, so I'll just turn it over to you, and you can say hello to everybody.
Excellent. Well, thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much to you, Lars, for inviting me into this very special day. We are celebrating the launch of your new book, and there are so many things that I want to say about you as well. And I think that it's appropriate for this to be a small love fest over the course of the hour. But I want to start with the congratulations, first of all. And then I will continue to congratulate you as we continue our conversation today. But I'm also really excited to actually have the tables turned. You are somebody who has held the space for so many of us in the world of HR for so long that I'm really, really excited to put you in the spotlight. I won't say hot seat because I'm not going to grill you, but really, like, today is your day. Today is your day to shine and to feel the love and appreciation from the community that you have so lovingly built over so many years. So I am thrilled to be here. I will be your host today. I have so many questions for you. And I think you asked me to introduce myself, which I did not do, but it doesn't really matter. I'm just your host. So to the audience, hello, I'm Katelin Holloway. I've been a people and culture executive for the last 11 years, did many things prior to that don't matter. Currently partner at a venture capital firm called 776. Still very much focused on people and culture and the ways in which we can make this world a slightly better place to live and work. So how's that, Lars? Did I do okay?
You did great. Yeah, I endorse that description. And also, I think you brushed over your earlier work. You have a portfolio of amazing work prior to getting to 776. So yeah, that's how we connected back when you were running people at Reddit and doing some amazing things there. So that was where our friendship began. And look at us now.
It's so true. We've come so far. And yes, I've decided to stop talking about my past accolades, mostly because it ages me tremendously. And Demio does not have a filter. I don't get to my beautiful airbrushed face. So people will know my age if I continue on my resume.
I'm throwing out all the grays to like mask that. So I think people will be, they'll be caught up in my gray hair. They won't even notice black and filter. So I think you're safe.
Okay. We're distinguished. We'll say that.
Yeah.
Or we're just parents in a pandemic living in our bunkers.
Oh my God. The amount of grays I've accumulated the past year alone, that's another conversation for another episode.
Truly. So are you ready? May I dive in?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm all yours. And I guess one quick thing just to mention before I fully turn it over to you is we want to make this interactive as well. So if I know we've got a lot of attendees out there as well. If you have questions for Katelin, for me, on the book, for each other, we're going to do our best to get to those as well. And I will caveat that by saying we're kind of DJing our conversation with keeping a half eye on the chat window. So we'll try to check it out in real time. If not, we'll probably have a break at different times to see if there are any questions. So you might need to ask your question twice. If we're in the middle of something and we missed it the first time, we'll make sure we've got some dedicated breaks for questions so you can ask whatever you have.
I'm glad that you said that because I am terrible at multitasking. Even though we've been doing this virtual world for almost a year now, I still cannot be present on screen and divert my attention. So I think little breaks to check in with the audience is perfect.
Yeah, that was literally just me like peeking over several times, being like, "Oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do this." So this is real time learning.
It's true. And so, hi, friends, everyone that's out there. I can see. I was trying to keep my eye on it, and I saw some hellos. So hello and hi. Thank you so much for being with us today. This is such an exciting day. I personally have been waiting for this for a very, very, very long time. I have my book sitting back here. I got early access. That's what happens when you get to write the foreword of a book. And it is just, I'm so excited for the world to get their paws on this incredible piece of work. Before we talk about the book, though, Lars, you did an okay job giving yourself an introduction. So I'm gonna give it another whack if you don't mind. Okay, good. So
Yes.
dear audience, if you do not actually know Lars yet, give it a minute. He will find you. He will find you because he deeply, deeply cares about people. He's so curious about what makes us tick, how we can make this world of work a better place. He genuinely, genuinely loves people. And I can say that not just because we have built our relationship through that lens over the years, but because he's dedicated his entire career to it. So Lars, similar to me, has a long and beautiful history in the workforce, from journalist to podcaster to speaker to author of best-selling books, all of the things. But really, Lars, at the end of the day, is a master community builder. And that's something that I very much admire in him and appreciate about him. He has introduced me to some incredible people over the years. I think that one of his knacks for doing incredible work in our space is just really the ability to connect the right people at the right time, which sounds really silly. Some people call that recruiting, or that's a skill that's good for recruiters to have. But really, it's a really hard thing to do. And he has done it consistently for as long as I've known him and beyond. The people that join in his work, I was going to say movement, Lars, and I'm going to stop myself, but really this space that you've created for people leaders and aspiring people leaders, and now business leaders, not just people leaders, to really focus on creating a better workspace is just absolutely admirable. And you've done it in every job that you've had, regardless of the industry or your title or your function or any of that. And so, to the audience, like, lucky us that Lars has been so generous in sharing his learnings over the years, has finally put some pen to paper to bring those stories and tales to life, and incorporating, in true Lars fashion, incorporating and embracing the community and the people in his community that are out there living it every day in the trenches. And so it's a very symbiotic relationship that I think many of us have with Lars and with the Amplify community that he has built. And so, like I said, if you don't know him yet, just wait. It is a very special and important relationship to all of us in the people space, to me in particular. So, Lars, I'm so grateful to call you a colleague and a friend. I am eternally grateful to you for your contributions to our field. You were one of the very first people to push this idea that HR should not be living in the back room, but it should be forefront, in the executive room, in the boardroom, an active voice in the strategic building of companies. And so I'm very, very grateful to you, personally, professionally, and I am proud of you. This sounds very silly to say to, between two grown people, but the mama bear in me wants to just say, like, I am so proud of you. This is an incredible achievement, and it's selling like hotcakes. Your book, Amazon, correct me if I'm wrong, I think ran out this morning. Had to go back to press I don't think that they went to the actual press, but to your publisher to make sure that we can stock it and get it in the hands of people. So just congratulations. How do you feel?
Wow. After that, pretty amazing. No, I mean, I think somebody wrote in the comments about me blushing. I feel like I'm blushing. Maybe it's not coming through. Maybe I have good lighting and good camera here, but yeah, no, it feels awesome. Like, I think that this book has been a long time coming. Like, it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time. I saw my good friend Ambrosia in the chat room, from her and I going back and building HR open source, and seeing that evolve and talking to practitioners all around the world around like what they were struggling with, what were their barriers to innovation, having a front row seat and access to so many people that were doing amazing work, and not just people who worked at blue chip companies that everybody heard of, but people off the beaten path who were like, they're doing really interesting work, but nobody knows who they are. And having the privilege of being able to see that and talk to those people and write case studies on their work, it's just, it's amazing. And so I think like for me, the book was, I had a podcast, I had, the Fast Company column, I have all these different channels where I was putting out pieces of content And in those moments in time, and open source projects, like in those moments of time, those pieces of content, I think were valuable, but they didn't necessarily, in my mind, I could see the overarching story that connected them all together. But for every disparate piece of content, I couldn't really tell that cohesive, broader narrative around how the field of HR is changing. And so that was really the driver in creating the book. Is I was like, I want to find a way to kind of package all these things that I've been doing, and all of these practitioners who I know are doing interesting work, and shine a light on them, and really paint a vision for what HR can be at our best. Because I think that you look at the field of HR, and too often there's stigmas and stereotypes around it that aren't things that we carry. They're legacy perceptions of the way that legacy oriented counterparts practiced HR. But it's not the HR that I know. It's not the HR that you know. I think most of the people watching this right now, it's not the HR that you practice. And so I wanted to tell that story. Like, this is what great HR looks like. This is what's happening right now, and do it in a way that it wasn't about me and necessarily my take on all of it, because I'm not a practitioner. I haven't been in that seat for 7 years. It was about me tapping into that network that you mentioned and giving them a platform to share their stories and their practices. So yeah, that's to me, that's the most exciting part about the book and the way that it's been received so far, is that there's over 60 contributors featured in that book whose work will get a broader visibility through it. So I'm thrilled for that.
That's amazing. I very vividly remember we were in Paris at Unleash, and you gave a talk. And I don't know where you were in your own mental processing of like, I need to write this book, this story. I have a story that needs to come out. But I feel like that presentation. Do you remember the one I'm talking about? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It was in Paris, and yeah.
Was it 19 or 20? I mean, I truly don't.
It was 20. I don't know, the years are all mashing up. I think it was 2019. It was 2019 in Paris, and it was the first time I'd kind of put together a framework for redefining HR, which at the time I was calling 21st century HR. And so I remember I grabbed you. I was like, because you're Katelin, when she's at events like this, she's in demand and everybody wants her to be at their events. But I made a point to grab you and be like, okay, look, like, I trust your judgment. You need to come to the session. This is kind of the debut of me sharing like what my vision is for modern HR. And that really kind of became the foundation of the book. If you, I don't know if you can't remember the slides well enough because a shitload has happened since then, but like the most of those slides and sections translated to chapters in the book. So yeah, what you saw was really kind of the the alpha version of the book.
Well, so I do remember slides. I mean, I know this sounds crazy, but as an avid HR conference attendee, my favorite thing to do is to take that intentional pause to go and see the work of others and understand how other people are thinking about the world in which we are trying to create together. And so in the spirit of co-creation, I will take photographs of slides where I'm like, oh, that's an important thing to remember. And it also will help me to remember to attribute them to the person who is sharing. And I remember standing, because there was standing room only for this particular presentation. I remember standing in the back, and I was so irritated because people kept interrupting me and I was trying to listen, but I took photos of the slides that I thought were important, where I was like, this is important. This is an important thing. And by the end of it, I was like, well, shit, I just took a picture of every single slide. I should just ask them for the deck. And then when I got the first manuscript of Redefining HR, I was like, this is it. This is what he needed to tell. And so I very, very vividly remember being there and feeling the energy in the room, feeling the audience responding to what you were saying, because you had threaded a needle. Threaded, is that properly spoken? You were able to,
we'll allow it. It's like 10 a.m. your time. So.
Thank you. You were able to properly thread a needle that I think was really important, and it really, really resonated with the audience. And one other thing that I remember thinking was, my goodness, why are we just sharing this in a closed ecosystem of people leaders? Because this is not just for us. This is for every business leader, every business executive, every founder, every CEO needs to understand what's happening here. And so that's another reason I'm so excited for you to be able to share this book. And so let's flash forward. That was, I think we've established Paris 2019, or sometime in the yesteryears, but that was obviously before a pandemic. And so if you had decided at that point in time or somewhere around then to commit to writing this book, you then had to probably or presumably shift your attention very quickly once the world went into lockdown. What was your original thinking in that? Did you consider pausing? Did that inspire you to go faster or change any of your plans? I mean, you wrote and published a book in the middle of a gosh darn pandemic. Like, what did it look like for you?
It was an interesting endeavor. Like, I think I signed the deal in, I want to say mid to late January. Had the kind of, the initial version of the chapter structure in February. Started writing a little bit. Actually, truth be told, when I first signed the book deal, I thought I was going to be able to repurpose a lot of my Fast Company articles, because I was like, I kind of cover these things. And I think the first time I submitted a run of a chapter to my editor, she was like, oh yeah, we ran these through like our plagiarism editor, and these have been published, so you can't use this. I was like, yeah, but I published them. Like, these are my words. And they're like, yeah, you can paraphrase, but you can't. So I was like, shit. Okay, so I'm going to be doing a lot more writing. That was like an additional 20,000 words that I, initially didn't envision I'd be writing. So I started writing, and then obviously, late February, we started getting the sign that, COVID was coming and this was going to be a thing. And I kind of dropped everything at that point to focus on that open source doc. And it was like, I think, my driver was, I knew it was a place where I could add value. And so I knew that was important kind of at the stage that we were in. And so that then is, that probably took, a month of I dropped everything for a month and did nothing but that, and like maintaining that list. And then, the next month went by and I've had a few other things to get involved in, not write the book. I think I didn't write a single word for the first 2 months of the pandemic. My publisher is based in the UK. They were furloughed. And so I finally got a hold of the main agent, like not my editor, but like her boss. And she was like, yeah, the deadline is, a month away. Like, how's it looking? I'm like, oh yeah. I thought maybe given a pandemic, that deadline might be flexible. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna need an extension. And so I really didn't start kind of to sit down in earnest to write until May. And I cranked at that point. And I think that there's actually a lot of value in my procrastination, because I was able to cover a lot of the things that were happening over the course of 2020 in the book, from, George Floyd's murder to Black Lives Matter to the, the protests around racial justice, to the impact of open source supporting kind of the community through COVID, through, burnout at the CHRO role, and just the stress and weight of everything to distributed and remote work, right? So in some ways, the delay actually allowed the book to be probably one of the first, HR books that's written in the reality that was set for us in 2020, which, to say, oh, that was by design. Like, yeah, I wrote, but like it was, part design, part procrastination. But I'm really happy with how it came out, because it allowed me to cover all those events that were seismic events for HR and people ops, and be able to kind of weave them into the chapters of the book, so that the book is kind of a now narrative on the state of modern HR, and not something that, didn't account for those things. Because to me, that would have been just incomplete. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. I didn't realize that you didn't start writing until May. This is a massive amount of work. I know that, as a writer myself who aspires to be a published author one day, I know that for me, a large part of the process is having it stew, right? Having it sit, and you're sitting there and you're trying to make those points of connections, and you're trying to create the arc. And when it's time to go, it's time to go. And so I think that that's really, really interesting. And I'm glad and grateful that you did procrastinate, because, the title of the book, Redefining HR, what a more definitive moment. I think that the industry was being pushed towards this, and part of your inspiration and part of your talk at Unleash was really about how okay, if we need to shove ourselves into this new era, like I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then 2020 happened. And I think that was the tipping point. 2020 was exactly what we needed to really fully embrace so many of the things that you discussed in the book. But let me go back and repeat myself one more time with a slightly different tone, which is, you published a book in the middle of a pandemic. That is, in and of itself, is something to be very, very proud of. But it does probably alter traditional book launch plans. And so, like, instead of doing a fancy book tour, gallivanting around the country and the world, going to bookstores and slapping stickers on old ladies kindly and politely, what are you going to do? Like, what are your book launch plans?
You make it sound like I'm really missing out with the stickers on old ladies thing.
It would have been brilliant.
No, I think look, when I signed the deal, it was before COVID hit. Like, I had ambitions of, because through like our conference speaking stuff, like I have friends in Australia and Germany and the UK and obviously California and New York. And so I was like, okay, this is gonna be a multi-city book tour. I had, companies that were willing to sponsor and actually underwrite the event, which was great. And so clearly that's not happening now. And so I had to think about, like, there's really not much of a playbook around, how to replicate a book tour digitally. And so I did a few questions with Minda Harts, who's a friend, and, she wrote a fantastic book and did some continued, promotion and kind of book tours. And so that was definitely helpful for me. And what I decided I wanted to do is, I didn't want to, when you're writing a book and you're promoting a book, you already have to be overly self-promotional, right? That's just the nature of writing a book. And if you're an author, like, you have to tell people you wrote a book, and that's, that comes with the territory. I get that begrudgingly, but I know that's part of what goes into writing a book. So I didn't want to do something that was a look at me thing, because I didn't know how valuable that would be. And frankly, I wasn't that comfortable. Just, I was already, knew I was kind of pushing the boundaries of self-promotion. I didn't really want to just do something like, do you want to hear me read this chapter? Like, no, nobody wants to hear that. So I was like, what can I do that's actually going to be valuable to the community, right? Because a lot of that's kind of my orientation. If I'm doing something, like, how is this additive to my community, my network? And so what I came up with was really what this is, the first in the series of Fireside Chat. So basically, every month over the entire year of 2021, I'm going to be hosting an intimate conversation like this with an expert from a different discipline that's featured in the book. So it'll allow, me to kind of bring in the readers and the audience into those discussions, also give them access to those people as well. So those are people that they might not have relationships with, that it might be hard for them to ask them a question. And, now I'll create that platform for you to do so. So you can ask questions. We'll make it really interactive. And so, every month over the course of this year, I'll be doing one of these. There'll be hour-long sessions. They're capped at 150 live attendees to keep them kind of intimate and interactive. And it'll be people from, Josh Burson to Darren Murph to Al Adamson, tons of people who I learn from, and they inspire me. And so I was like, okay, that to me, obviously, we'll talk about stuff that's in the book. I'm sure I'll find a way to say, hey, by the way, if you like this conversation, buy my book. But more importantly, I think it'll be additive and interesting to the community, and it'll give people access to, leading thinkers in different disciplines of modern HR that they might not ordinarily have access to. And to me, that also kind of is consistent with the ethos of the book. Like, I don't claim to be an expert on everything of HR, and I own the fact that I'm not a practitioner. So I certainly have blind spots. I think where I have probably unique value is that I have, even though I don't have that direct expertise in a lot of ways, I know the people that do. I know the people who are the leading thinkers in people analytics. So I know the people that are doing groundbreaking work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I can bring them into the conversation and learn from them, and allow the readers in the community to learn from them. So it's not me, fronting like I'm the expert in all these areas, which I'm not. But I can kind of DJ those conversations and hopefully create more learning, but basically build something that's valuable to the readers and the listeners, as opposed to just, kind of waving a big flag saying, I wrote a book, you should buy it.
Well, I don't think any of us mind that, particularly those that want to read it. And I also understand the feeling of not wanting to do that, going against your comfort zone. But I do think it's important, like I said, that the more people who we can put this book in the hands of, I genuinely believe the better our world of work will be. And yeah, I'm actually really excited. I think you did not ask my opinion, but I will tell you. I think that you should do a reprise when the world reopens. I do think that you should go to bookstores and put stickers on little old ladies, politely and kindly. But I'm also very much looking forward to what you've designed in the programming. Like, some of my personal favorites, my mentors like Katarina Berg from Spotify, and Claude Silver over at Vayner. Like, these are people that I just admire so much. I could riff with them all day, all night on all things people. And so I think that creating a slightly different space than like your typical, hey, come to this big conference and you might get lucky if you get in a good breakout room. Truly, I could wax poetic about people with anyone and would welcome it. But I think it's really cool to also amplify the folks that maybe are lesser known or don't have the great PR teams supporting their personal brands. And so I think it's a great idea, all things considered. But I do think that you should add a live component when you're able, when we are all able, because I think that we would love to get together.
Yeah, no, look, obviously, you were on the conference circuit like I was. Like, I certainly have withdrawal. Like, I miss my friends. Like, a lot of the people who I'm at, like, I see, obviously Ambrosia and Craig and a bunch of people in the chat who I would have probably seen 4 or 5 times last year under normal circumstances. Now I haven't. And so I miss that part. One of my good friends who's actually not in the HR space, but he was texting me this morning and he was asking, about book travel plans. And I joked that might be my reason to write a 3rd book is like a proper book tour with the cities and humans. So we'll see. I just certainly won't rule that out.
I love that. I see Samara just chatted too. There's another HR tech conference queen. So looking forward to Transform. We'll give you a little plug there. Love it. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about the content of the book. We're halfway through our time together. And I think given the folks that we're chatting in the room about, I think half joking, but half seriously saying, read us a chapter, Lars. I won't make you read yet, unless we run out of things to talk about. But let's talk a little bit about some of the content. So I have a few questions that I think I'm curious to learn about. But one thing that I think would be probably most interesting to the audience is, what chapter was the hardest for you to write? So I know that you have tons of content that you were leaning on. You've had these conversations for so long with so many people. But was there anything that like you really got stuck on, whether it was because of the pandemic or not, or any of the other things that have happened in recent history? But was there anything that like didn't flow out of your fingers nicely and gracefully?
I think that not so much anything didn't flow, but the chapter that I think I scrutinized the most was chapter 3 called Building a Company for Everyone. It is basically I talk about building and embedding inclusive practices throughout your kind of people operations, employee lifecycle in almost every chapter. I touch on it because I think it's important that modern operators think about inclusion and representation in a holistic way, as opposed to just something that they look at more like recruiting. And so, I wrote that after George Floyd's murder and after the outcry around racial justice, was happening. And I think that was triggering a global conversation. I think that was triggering individual introspection, hopefully in most people. I know it was in me. And so writing that chapter after, or while I should say those moments were taking place, it reinforced to me a couple things. Like, one, I had to get that chapter right.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford to not get that chapter and the messaging that HR needed to hear, not necessarily the message that HR wanted to hear. And so I had to have some uncomfortable truths in that about HR's role in maintaining systems of inequity and not doing enough to actually build more inclusive organizations and being part of the problem, which, legacy HR mindset is part of that problem. And we have to own that if we're going to move forward. And so, it's probably one of the longer chapters in the book. I spent some time, writing it. I did lots of research. I had dozens of conversations, brought in lots of voices, from friends or people who I admire their work and their voice, and I wanted to harness it in the book. But even from there, even when I was done writing it and I reread it, my editor pushed back a little bit because they thought I was too pointed in some points, which, maybe they were because I was, fired up in the moment. And so they gave me some good feedback, but I think I was really valuable that there's a handful of friends, once I had the chapter done, that I gave it to. And I said, how do I get this? What is this missing?
Yeah.
What are points? Because again, I'm a middle-aged, cisgender white guy in good health, in middle income. I'm the most advantaged class there is, if we're being honest, right? And so through that, despite my efforts, I know that I have blind spots, and I felt that it was really important that this chapter didn't. And so it was really important for me to kind of socialize the chapter to some of my friends and get their perspectives and get their edits. And so I think through that, I'm really happy with where it landed. I think it names and gets into things like white supremacy, just things that we have to be honest about as practitioners if we really want to make a difference. And so some people will read it and probably, take offense to that. That's fine. Those are people that probably shouldn't be working in HR. But I think others hopefully will take inspiration. And through a lot of the chapters in the book, one of the things that was really important to me is to not necessarily, you talk about kind of legacy HR operators and modern operators. I didn't want to, shame people that weren't working in these innovative best-in-class organizations. My aim is not to say well, great HR is here, and if you're not doing that, you suck, right? I think my aim was to say, here's what's possible, and here's what leading companies are doing, and you can do this too. Maybe you can't do all of it. Maybe you have certain barriers you're not going to be able to overcome, but here are some beacons of light that you can look to and be like, I want to emulate some of those things. And so I think that it was really important for me to also, while being direct and calling things out that needed to be called, do it in a way that it was kind of a bridge to that more aware and hopefully more intentionally and deliberate about building, inclusive and representative organizations. Hopefully that's going to be kind of where they'll land after getting through that chapter.
I think it's interesting the way you talk about it. It's unsurprising that that's the chapter that you call out as something that was more challenging to write for all of the reasons that you listed. I have a few thoughts on all of it. One thing that I really liked about the book was exactly what you said. There wasn't one chapter dedicated to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and done. It was one that addressed it on the nose, absolutely. But you can feel the equity work, you can feel the inclusivity work throughout the chapters. And it's because you use case studies from so many people that demonstrated the work, because you talked about, for example, you cannot talk about compensation or rewards and recognitions or total rewards or whatever your company calls it without talking about equity, right? And not equity as in stock options, equity as in equality. So those policies and fair pay practices that go into building those things, which is a more obvious place where we can apply the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging lens. But there are other places that are less obvious. And so I love that you could feel it throughout the book. And I could feel your intentionality behind that. The second thought that I have around that chapter in particular is understanding what it looked like before and what actually made it into the finished product. It was quite the evolution. You gave me some sneak peeks. We had several late night conversations and texts about, my goodness, what is my role in this? I think identifying our own place in the world, our own place within organizations as practitioners, as operators, and as people who do have the privilege of having platforms to share and change the dialogue. And I think that one thing that I am very proud of for you, in you, that so many people won't get to see is that kind of before and after of that particular part of the book, because there's so much growth, there's so much learning for you that you can feel between those two. And so I just want to acknowledge and recognize that I really do think that you put in the hard work, which is, you know, one of our greatest barriers in doing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work is not taking the easy path. And to put one particular fine point on it, you know, we talk about legacy HR and we talk about modern HR or the future of HR. And what I felt in this was actually something in between. I felt it in you, I felt it in me, I felt it in colleagues in the space of like, okay, so if we've been the future of work and we've been modernizing HR for the last decade, which is something we claim, a lot happens in 10 years. and so much in particular has changed in very, very, very recent history. And I could feel it, like I said, between us as individuals, as a collective, of like, what has my role been and how would I do things differently moving forward? And so I really felt very inspired by the work that you did in that chapter, and very personally inspired to be less self-congratulatory about the work that we've done, and be more, I would say, you know, not to poo-poo on all of the work that we have done, but I think to recognize that this is fluid, it's dynamic, it must continue to evolve. And, you know, what was maybe, you know, groundbreaking or tip of the iceberg or tip of the spear thinking, you know, even 5 years ago, is now outdated. And so we need to continue to improve personally. We need to continue to improve and self-reflect. And so I think in that chapter, I felt a lot of the emotion that so many of us felt of like, maybe I am failing my organization or organizations, or, you know, maybe I need to rethink this. This was working, it's no longer going to work. And so I just want to applaud you for that chapter. I'm glad that you named that. I don't know what I would have said if you had said something else, but I think it's really appropriate. So a small follow-up question, but broaden the aperture a little bit for me. So I think sometimes as an industry, we can be our own worst enemy on occasion. Yeah. We're also our biggest fans, but sometimes we can get in our own way. So in your opinion, this can be related to the previous conversation or something entirely different. In your opinion, what do you think is really holding us back right now?
I mean, I think that the ability for the bulk of the field to begin pulling away from the legacy-oriented past and embracing those modern practices. And that's a massive bucket answer. So let me kind of drill down a bit more. You know, I talk about a little bit in the book. I kind of look at a lot of people paint HR with one brush, right? HR is this, you know, HR is this, as if it's some, you know, mono capability function. And that's just not how it is. Like the way I look at the field is, you know, a lot of the leading work that I cover in the book is probably the top 10% of the field, right? Like 10% of people have most of those practices at different, you know, degrees of advancement integrated in their people strategy. The other side of that pendulum is probably about 20%. And that's more of the personnel, administrative, transactional, right? They're stuck there. They're not going to be able to pull out of that. But the bulk of the field is somewhere in the middle, you know, 70%. And again, these are anecdotal numbers. Don't ask me where my data is. I don't have data. This is just my own personal view. But the bulk of that field is in the middle. And so I think, you know, for us to begin moving forward, you know, you saw some of it take place last year. And, you know, based on, you know, my roots, you probably guessed this answer was coming. But I think our ability to move away from our siloed, walled off past and embrace more open and open source practices and sharing and collaborating and you know, holding a middle finger to the idea of the war on talent and realizing that, you know, it's not zero sum. We can all, you know, win in terms of like leveling up our people capabilities. You saw that last year, right? You saw that in COVID where we went through this global phenomenon that nobody had ever been through. There was no playbooks around, like how do you guide your company through what seemingly was an overnight global pandemic. And the way we got through that was by sharing, was by talking about what we were doing, talking about what our policies were going to be, talking about how we move people to be remote for those of us that had employees that could that had the privilege of being able to do so. How we stayed in touch with kind of what was happening in the global kind of maturation of COVID to determine, like, are we going to go back to an office? Like, there's a period of time last year where we were like building return to work plans, and that was like a month, and then those all got blown up. It was like, it's not safe to do that, and it's not going to be anytime soon. And so, to me, I saw lots of companies and lots of leaders who traditionally didn't have a reputation for sharing and kind of working out loud doing that. And that was something that obviously, Ambrosia and I beat that drum heavily with HR open source. Google Rework has done the same. Now you're seeing more groups like, Hacking HR and Disrupt HR and all these other communities popping up, getting people to kind of collaborate and work out loud. And to me, that's going to be the thing that's going to unlock that faster acceleration towards HR's future, is that, like, I don't have to pay a membership to an organization to get access to templates. I don't have to go to a conference to learn how X company solved Y problem. There's lots of that information available. Leaders like you are blogging about what you're working on and where you're struggling and where you're failing, right? There's a level of humility and openness at the CPO role today that didn't exist a couple of years ago. And so I think all of those things together are really what's going to be the thing that allows us to kind of shed some of those shackles of our legacy stigmas and move the field forward. And that's not an overnight thing. That's going to take time. But I think that's it's not the general legacy orientation is what's holding us back. But as we embrace open source, and especially because not all our future isn't entirely in our hands, right? We as practitioners, like, our executive team has to be bought in. Our budgets have to actually back up the rhetoric of saying, we believe in building a people-first organization. Cool, let me see your budgets, right? Like, we have to be resourced in a way to be successful. But as we do more of those things, as more of those examples are visible, and this is my shameless plug, as more CEOs and founders read Redefining HR and get a sense of what's possible, then they will start unlocking some of those barriers for practitioners to be able to do more progressive work. So to me, that's if you had to identify one single shift that's happening now that's going to allow us to kind of realize that future at a much larger scale sooner, it's the embrace of kind of open practices and collaboration.
You obviously are speaking my language. This is something that I picked up from you and Ambrosia in those really early days of HR open source. I've said this almost every time I've gotten in front of a camera and on a mic with you, which is like, I don't think that I would have the career that I have today if it weren't for this idea of open sourcing, coming into the world of people without having any experience. I mean, zero experience other than being an employee and knowing that a HR team existed. My career would not be where it is. And so I say that half in gratitude with a full heart, but also to like say, yes, because to expand on your point here about the need for open and collaborative and the way in which we're going to really shift and move the way the world goes to work every day, the experience that we as humans going to work every day, it's going to rely entirely on that premise. And like I said, to kind of expand on that a little bit, it's also where people that believe just fundamentally, like from a first principle, best practice, whatever you want to call it, place of just like, I feel it in my bones, which I know, looking at this audience, like I know that they know what I'm talking about. When we feel it, titles don't matter. Titles do not matter, which is why Redefining HR is not an HR book. I will shout that from the mountains. I know that you wrote it first in all caps, and I will continue to shout it with you. This is not an HR book. So, even, take a look at Ambrosia and I. We are no longer technically in chief people officer or VP of people roles. We've swam upstream in a different direction to go work in a totally different capacity as investors, as people who are working for venture capital, as we think about who are the future founders and who are the funders that are going to hold our boards accountable to ensuring that we have diverse equitable, inclusive workforces? Who are the ones that are going to say, hey, we do need budget allocation over here. If you are not minding this, we have a problem. Hey, we do need resources here. We need resources that look like the world in which we live. So it goes beyond one person having a set of 3 menial OKRs with 0 resources. This goes to us saying, hey, look, this isn't about like HR being better or trying to convince, Tom or Nancy from the compliance room to come out and like suddenly present a beautiful, diversity dashboard. This is about like, let's make this place better, truly, and mean it, right? And so I think that the more people that can digest and read what you've put out into the world, between the case studies, the quotes, like I said, just the weaving of these policies and practices throughout every different part of the human experience, the employee experience within organizations, we will rise the tides. Like we will buoy all ships with the rising tides is what I'm trying to say. So I will crawl down off of my little soapbox, but say like, I am so thrilled for this book to be out in the wild as of today. And we have 10 minutes left here. I, of course, have plenty more questions, but I want to give the audience a moment to ask Lars any questions if you have them. So let's see. I don't know if I missed any. This chat, my font in this chat is super big.
I know. I guess I'll add to that. Like, if you've already asked a question, we definitely missed it. So if you have questions, please ask them again.
Okay. So
I see one question from Jesse. What did you do when you finished the book? So when it's kind of like, you finish writing the book, but then you have final edits, and then those edits have edits. So it's like, it's kind of anticlimactic when you're going through that. But once it was like done and locked down, there's definitely a bottle of Veuve that my wife and I shared to celebrate. It was exciting. Like I'm not gonna try to be cool about it, be like understated, like, oh yeah, it's just a book. Like, yeah, I was fucking stoked. Like it was something that I had been thinking about for a long time. And it was like, my favorite part about the book, to be honest, was like when I set out to write the book, I had a vision of what it would be. Like I knew what I wanted to say. I kind of knew how I wanted to organize the content. I knew how I wanted to harness lots of external voices and perspectives from my network. But when I got to the end and I was proofing it, for the 100th time as you go through that, it was the book I wanted to write. And that was like so cool to actually be able to have that moment where you're like, oh my God, like this is what I set out to do. So yeah, lots of celebration, little champagne. We'll be having margaritas tonight to celebrate for the second phase now that it's released globally. But very, very exciting.
That's so awesome. Okay, so Kim asks, she is trying to make this a movement, which I appreciate about Kim. So many mom jokes in there I'm not going to do. But she says, what do you want to see next in terms of collective action to rise the tide and build #future work?
I want to see, what I would love to see happen is I want to, through this book and maybe the conversations that it creates, I want to meet a whole lot of people I don't know now who believe in this and are championing this work and are sharing their practices and are open sourcing their toolkits and are speaking at conferences, not the same people like me who you always see up on the stage, some fresh talent, more representative talent. As well. So that to me is a big part of what I would like to see. And I think this, I closed the book kind of talking about as we're redefining HR, it's about making work and the industry better for our companies, our teams, our employees, and each other. And each other is a huge important piece there. I think if we get more people, collaborating, more people sharing, more people, going out of their way to be of service to each other and to this industry, it'll be mind-boggling what we can do. But if we embrace that and we work to do it together. So I'd love to see more of that. I think I've seen, even in the last couple of years, a lot more of that already. But I'd love to see like a spark in even more people. Particularly, I'd love to meet more people who I don't know yet. As Katelin graciously mentioned earlier, like I'm, building a robust and diverse and eclectic network is something that drives me. It makes my work better. It broadens my perspective. And so I hope that I'm able to meet, new people who I don't know, who are, inspired by either, this book or conversations from the book or conversations that have nothing to do with the book, but are just around people trying to really propel us all forward as a collective, as opposed to kind of seeking out individual, glory or hype around a particular project.
Yeah, I actually really like that you say that. I think this is like the perfect moment for us to say, like, I know that you and I both get invited to speak at a number of HR conferences and just, global conferences around the future of work, whatever the hell that is. But I, looking at this group, the name that's on my screen right now, Balbina, like, if there's anybody in the audience, I would love to help amplify these, incredible new rising stars in our function. So I'm looking at you, Balbina. If you want an invite, or anyone else in this, if you want to be added to the list of folks that I would gladly share the stage, share the mic with, like, please do. I know Lars cares about this too. So if there's anyone out there who's interested in helping us amplify this message, we are sick of hearing our own voices. So please do let us know. We're happy to share.
Yeah, and Balbina's phenomenal. I think the two of you will hit it off for sure. And to her question, I guess we're recording this, so I'll read it for folks who are watching this later, can't read it. She said, any sneak peeks you can share about upcoming plans for building the Redefining HR community? You started the book, newsletter, podcast so far. Yes, and kind of TB on that. So I have a lot of thoughts of where I want to go from here. Like, part of what I've been doing over the last couple of years through the podcast and the writing and the community building has really been building an ecosystem. And as that ecosystem has grown, I'm the question I ask myself all the time is like, how can I add value? Like, how can I be additive to our community? And like, obviously I'm going to, marinate in this moment of the book launch for the next couple of weeks. But I've been thinking about that very question is like, okay, like I have this ecosystem that's being building. What can I create that's of value? And I have some ideas for that. They're not developed enough to share yet, but that's kind of my what's next is thinking about what, with this growing ecosystem, and I imagine growing more from the book, what can I create that will be of value that actually solves a need? And I think for me, that's what's interesting is like, because I have this network and I'm able to have all these conversations around like, what do you struggle with? Like, what do you need? What do you wish you had? I want more of that question around what do you wish you had to guide what I build. And so I think that will be what's next. And I want to, probably Q2, I'll be in kind of deep work on that and hopefully be ready to roll something out there in Q3.
Awesome. Well, Lars, we have just a few minutes left. I think the last thing that I have two last questions. One, in the what's next question, are you going to write a sequel? Are we going to have a revised edition? Are you going to write a second volume? Is there any, or are you going to pause on the writing for a minute?
It's funny. Like I probably, yes. Like I want to be coy, like, oh, but like, look, I'm going to enjoy this moment. I don't want to, I'm always like kind of what's next. Like, me, like I tend to be very focused on building stuff and creating stuff. I'm going to deliberately work against that for at least the next couple of weeks to just kind of, savor this moment and kind of be present in it. But I think that there's more work to do. There's more stories to be told. And I think, and this is, let me come back to you in 2 weeks or so from this. But I think based on the way this book has been received and based on the way that people are really understanding that this book isn't about me, it's about spotlighting other practitioners who are doing interesting work. I think it'll raise the profile of people wanting to contribute to those kinds of projects. And that's the kind of book that I want to write. It's more like real stories from all of you in this chat room who are in operating roles, your stories. And so, I'm not ready to make a commitment to it, but I certainly could see myself writing another book similarly themed in terms of really, harnessing more case studies, more stories, more personal narratives and essays.
Awesome. Okay, friend, you have the last 2 minutes is yours. Anything else you'd like to share with us before we sign off?
I think, thank you. Let me start there. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for, buying the book, borrowing the book, whatever, reading the book. Mostly, I don't care how you get it. Thank you for reading the book. And thank you for the work that you're doing. There's a lot of friends in here. There's a lot of familiar faces in the chat. I know the work that you're doing, and I know the impact you're having. And so I do want to, recognize that and appreciate, the work that you're doing. And I would just say, as a call to action, perhaps for all of us, you keyed on a couple of things that to me are really important about the book, which is this is a business book, not an HR book necessarily. And so if you want to build a great business, you have to have a robust and progressive people function. And so, one of my hopes with this book, which is kind of similar to what I was aiming to do when I started writing for Fast Company, is to take some of these conversations that we're having internally around modern HR and raising them up to the CEO level, to the CXO level, to the board level, so that they are now in a position to have a better understanding of what a great HR looks like. And hopefully they see that, they read the case studies, they read the stories, like, damn, we need that here. I need to make sure that I'm building the right people team. I need to make sure that I'm budgeting, and allocating resources to allow them to do their best work. So, where you have any opportunities, I guess that'll be my ask, to get this book in front of your CEOs, in front of your board members, in front of your executives. That's, I think, where we can make real and lasting difference. That will open the doors up more for all of us. So, I guess I'll leave it there. And just thanks so much. Thanks for being a part of this. Thanks for helping me launch the book. And Katelin, thanks for writing the foreword, being such an amazing partner in this and many other things. So thanks so much.
Of course. Congratulations, Lars. We are all so proud of you. Go celebrate.
I will. Don't you worry. Those margaritas and tacos will be coming.
Excellent. So good to see you all virtually. We'll see you on the next Fireside Chat.
All right. Take care, everyone. Take care of each other.
How do we